that self-reinforcing can be self-defeating. It's very dangerous for the elites to not have a Republican Party representing Europeans. It can be very, very dangerous for them. They know that. They know that. Not all of them agree on everything. The Hebrews might not like it, but big deal. Things change, but everything starts with a consistent message. No one's going to come out until a consistent message is coming out. It's like in China. No one's if you're in the Communist Party of China and you're thinking about walking across the line and smashing down a communist system and putting something else in its place, you've got to wait till a consistent message takes on in the crowds, and you've got to make sure you have your ducks in a line before you can start playing full spectrum practical politics. You know, if guys are running around trying to play basketball, you're not going to be associated with that. You can end up in jail or lose your head, or end up in a treason trial or something like that. But you're not going to do that in China. That's just common sense. But it all starts with this mantra. It all starts with a consistent message. The good news is that's done for you. The bad news is all you got to do is open up your little mouth and spread the words. It's very simple. It actually can be easy, but things can happen very, very quickly. Change happens in an instant once it's communicated. Just like when you made up your mind to go get ice cream. You communicate that, honey, let's go get some ice cream. Or your wife made you get out and get ice cream. Everything starts with a sound, generally speaking. But you can go anywhere you want to once you have that message articulated. You know, when Thomas Paine wrote Common Sense, it need not end up in a violent revolution. You know, that's how that worked. They played that basketball, and they played it well. But it didn't have to end up that way. But what it did start with is articulating a message, communicating a message, didn't it? That's what common sense was. It was communicating a message. And that's where it begins. Until you can articulate a message and repeat that message, well, you're kind of stuck. And by the way, in anything. But that's what we're here for, and that's why we're talking now, is to make sure you have a consistent message to be on, or even to listen to. But this is another end of Follow the White Rabbit, and this is the end of 10. And there's an interview coming out on Stormfront, and there's some other interesting stuff that'll be coming down. And number 11, I'm going to go into some environmental topics and talk about some different things going on in the blog. And hopefully this is giving you something interesting to listen to. Hopefully I'm not giving you the same old mundane thing. Putting out talking points, believe it or not, is very easy. When the Democrats and Republicans put them out, they just send a fax or send an email of talking points, and they read them off. I'm just trying to explain to you how this stuff works, so you know. I'm trying to entertain you. Truck Roy made the point that I've talked about some stuff that's kind of off the wall. That's for a reason. There's certain reasons for that, but my job becomes very difficult at first, simply because, you know, I'm told, you know, Horace, get them on a consistent message. Well, I have to talk about things no white nationalist has ever talked about, or no racialist has talked about, or I have to get your attention. To do that, I've got to do some homework. And doing my homework, I looked on YouTube, I looked on Google Video, and I saw all these people looking at all this stuff. And so everything I noticed that they were watching a lot of, like when it comes to the Joseph Farrell type stuff and the Nazi International type stuff, well, I talked about it. Simply because it was getting, if you add up the number of hits, it was millions of hits. I figure someone's watching it. So I'm trying to give you something that I know you're looking at, but come from a different angle. I've got to entertain you as well, which is why I had to come up with the White Rabbit type stuff. It sounds simple, and it is simple. It's just not easy to do. You know, putting out talking points is easy. Doing it in a way to get your attention, to help you understand, and to get you interested, or to get you listening to it, well, that's not so easy. That takes some amount of talent, I guess. But that's okay. We all have our job, and that's my job. And so if any of this was over your head, or you're not interested in it, that's fine, as long as I got your attention to put you on a consistent message. So there's going to be something in these things for everyone. And the most important thing is a consistent message, to have you on a consistent message at all times. I want to make a point about a consistent message that, you know, maybe most of the people listening to this don't understand how practical politics works. But practical politics starts with a consistent message. I refer to it as baseball. You know, you're learning how to hit singles, but that's all it is staying on point and constantly being on a consistent message. That's where it all begins. One thing you need to understand is that most of the other stuff, you will find out that once you're on a consistent message, and you're on our consistent message, you're playing that bugs follow the white rabbit correctly, most other things will be done for you. But you have to be on a consistent message. That's just the way it works. That's the way baseball works. Most of you are way too used to listening to something about basketball, shooting three-pointers, doing something violent, dealing steal. That's the only way a structure is brought down. Well, that's a different game. That's a different channel. But there's nowhere on earth that game is going on right now. The Taliban's trying to do that game, and they're doing somewhat of a decent job of that deal and steal. Of course, they've got lucky that the U.S. has shut down the war on terror. They've got lucky that our allies, and we've got lucky that our allies aren't supporting us in that. They didn't send any troops to Afghanistan. We didn't back it up with more troops. They called off the war on terror in Afghanistan, and we're looking for a road out of there. Also, the Russians, who knows how many problems they've created for us. But anyone that talks about a structure has to be brought down through violence, they don't understand the game going. That's simply ignorance. Baseball has nothing to do with violence at all. Baseball is about sound. Baseball is about harmonics. Practical politics starts with that. Practical politics is what you do when you open up your mouth. But everything starts with a consistent message. The reason in America, and this MP3 is specifically for America that you're listening to, is far behind is because of the state of demoralization, the amount of social engineering, and it takes a while for that to start wearing off. It takes 15 years under a new media, and that's why you're hearing me now. The upside to a two-party system is that it's very rigid. In Europe, a lot of groups, you're noticing groups starting to come to power. Well, they're in a lot more they have a lot more power there than you can really see with your eyes, simply because they have so many undercover levers. They have them all over the place. In other words, you'll have a small party in an area that will have several different operatives and several other parties, larger, smaller, whatever, waiting for certain events. But when it comes to the two-party system in America, we have two parties, Democrats and Republicans. The downside to that is it's very rigid. Very rigid means it's hard to break into. The upside of that is once you're on a consistent message, everything activates. The whole thing can turn around overnight. In Europe, it takes a little bit longer to negotiate coming to power. Here, politically speaking, you can come to power overnight. That's the way America works. Obama took over the Democratic Party overnight. That's just the nature of the political process here. It has its downsides. Yes, conventional politics has all kinds of downsides. But practical politics, the only thing we need you to do is be on a consistent message. Once you're on a consistent message, your team will play baseball for you, and you can go anywhere you want to go with a consistent message. We have that for you. But a consistent message basically creates a problem. It creates a continuous problem. That problem demands a reaction, and then we get to develop a solution. One of the reasons why they're ignoring our message, they can't ignore it in Europe. That's why we're doing so well. They can't ignore certain messages in Europe that are out there, and there's another reason too, is the Russians in Europe are helping things along, but they can't really ignore the message in Europe because of the fractured party system. You know, any political party can gain power in Europe, and there's a lot of different ways to operate in Europe that you can't operate in America simply because of the political scenarios. And I'm not necessarily talking about voting either. But in America, in the two-party system, and the way the whole American shindig is clogged up, to operate any way at all, it has to start a consistent message. Once you have a consistent message, then things can turn around. Then you'll be amazed at who's on your side. But until you're playing baseball, until you're hitting singles at them, they can't do anything. They can't do anything until you create the problem. And the problem's always created with a consistent message. Thus far, in America, they've tried to ignore us. That's all they can do. Because if they react, we immediately start implementing solutions. Once someone reacts, it of course creates a whole ramification for them as well. They can't really react to us in regards to any of our talking points, because they don't have the upper hand. Basically, maybe you've noticed that in immigration, they don't really have the upper hand, so they can't let those cats get out of the bag too much. But we go right for the jugular. we go right for the neck, and they can't afford to give an inch on that. At the same time, they can't do anything about it because we're playing baseball. So how do we get the reaction we're looking for? Well, you got to create the problem. We create the problem simply in baseball by being on a consistent